Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you all here. So many people in our webinar. It shows that there's a very big interest in nuclear produced hydrogen. So just a quick some quick messages. This webinar is being recorded, so you can access it later on our website, as well as the presentations of the speakers that agreed to share their presentations. Please leave your questions in the Q&A section of the Teams, and at the end of the webinar we will be able to answer some of your questions. All right. So without any further ado, I'll give the floor to my colleague Andre, which is the policy director of Nuclear Europe, for a short introduction to the webinar. Andre, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Guilherme. Good afternoon or good morning, because we have people attending from other parts of the world where it's morning now. On NuclearEU Europe behalf, I would like to welcome to the second of a series of webinars we are organizing on this very hot topic at EU level on hydrogen, with the focus, of course, on the nuclear produced one. As you might recall, the last one held in March this year focused on policies currently being discussed at EU level. Of course, much has happened since then, and we will give a short update on the policies also today. This webinar, is announced in the title, will focus on technical but also economical aspects of nuclear produced hydrogen. So we will have representative of various stages of the hydrogen value chain. So with that being said, and introduce about this edition of this new webinar, I will give the floor to Ayman, who is the chair of the Nuclear Europe Hydrogen Task Force, and he will be the one moderating the discussions. And wish success to the presenters, and hope that we will have good questions from the audience. Ayman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Guilherme. So welcome to all of you to our second session of webinars organized by the Hydrogen Task Force. This one, as mentioned by Andre, is going to focus on technology. The first one was focusing on policy, but of course, policy is still a very important topic that I think it is connected to the technology development, and is actually an enabler for technology to be developed in a fast way. So we thought of this webinar to keep sharing information and actually raising, let's say, some of the challenges and some of the success stories about this topic of nuclear and hydrogen. Hydrogen is benefiting from a great momentum, and I think we all agree that hydrogen is a good investment for decarbonization, but also for sovereignty development, for reindustrialization of many territories and many governments. But nuclear can still play a very good role, to keep the production in a high volume and low competitive costs. So today I have with me very distinguished speakers from somehow representing many sides of the market, like the policy side, but also the technology and the value chain. So I will start first by my colleague Lavinia, the permanent representation of Romania in Brussels, and it's in charge of atomic energy attaché. She's the attaché of atomic energy. So Lavinia, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself, introduce your role, and then tell us a little bit more about the policy updates on nuclear hydrogen. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you, Ayman. As mentioned, my name is Lavinia Rizea, and I am responsible here for council discussions on the role of nuclear energy. And it is my pleasure to share with you a small presentation. I hope you can see my screen. On the updates, what has been going on recently in the Council, discussions about the role of nuclear in different policy documents. So I will briefly discuss about the framework, what are the challenges, opportunities for hydrogen in the EU, going back through a few of previous chapters and coming to current discussions on the Green Deal, with some current files that we have on the table right now as Electricity Market Design, Net Zero Industry Act. Then a bit about financial aspects, which I think are important, and I would like to conclude with a small presentation of the Romanian hydrogen strategy, which has been recently launched, and I think will demonstrate how renewable and nuclear hydrogen can work together to support the economical development. So I think we are all familiar with challenges to develop a hydrogen market in Europe, but also the necessity, the opportunity. So we are talking about scaling up manufacturing capacities, but also the demand for hydrogen. So we have to develop these two and also set the steps to develop the hydrogen infrastructure, meaning transport, tariffs, and so on. This is a part of the gas package.
Lavinia, sorry,
yes?
Lavinia, we only see your first slide. We don't see the other slides. I still on the first one. Yes.
Okay. Let me
on full screen. Yes.
Okay. Let me reshare the slides then. Sorry. Are you seeing the slides now?
Yes.
So I'm on the slide about a case for hydrogen in Europe. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, right now we have a consumption of 8 million tons, which is really low. It's only 2% of the energy consumption, and it's mostly produced using natural gas. So obviously there is a potential to develop hydrogen to couple with intermittent renewables, but also to use in hard to abate sectors, in transport, and so on. So these are what is the purpose of the current policy documents. And now we are going to look a bit at the role of nuclear in the energy files in Europe. I cannot talk about the role of nuclear without referring a bit to the Nuclear Alliance. This is a group of member states, including Romania, France, Bulgaria, and others as well, who are working to promote the climate neutrality and the technology neutrality, which is the inclusion of nuclear in existing EU files. And recently a relevant meeting took place in Paris, where the Alliance announced a new target for nuclear development of 150 gigawatts by 2050 compared to the 100 which was already in place. So this gives an incentive and a perspective for nuclear on the long term in Europe. This is a bit of a background about previous discussions on hydrogen that were addressed also in March. Perhaps you know about a Clean Planet for All, which sets a baseline for nuclear to represent 15% of the EU energy mix in 2050. Then in 2020, we had the EU hydrogen strategy, which brought in the definition of low carbon hydrogen, because we currently have a debate about how to name it. You cannot call it nuclear, but you have to call it low carbon, low emissions, fossil free. So there is also a debate on the name tag. And more recently, in 2022, we had the REPowerEU plan, which was the response to the war in Ukraine, and the EU set new energy independence targets, including for hydrogen. But here the target is set at 20 million tons out of for renewable hydrogen, out of which 10 million is planned to be imported. So for us in the nuclear like-minded states, we are wondering why import when you can use all low carbon technologies in Europe to deliver this hydrogen. So again, this is an ongoing discussion. Going to some files which are relevant, this is the recently concluded discussion on Renewable Energy Directive. And you may wonder why we are talking about Renewable Energy Directive. Well, as the name says, it is the directive which sets the targets at EU level and at sectorial level for the development of renewable energy and also for hydrogen. This is an important piece of legislation, and it took quite a while to finish, to complete trilogues. It was done in June 2023. The text was confirmed. The debate was about how can we account in member states that want to use nuclear and to produce hydrogen using nuclear, how can we account this hydrogen towards the very ambitious EU targets? And we had quite a victory, a positive element for nuclear, where we managed to convince that nuclear and renewables should not be put into competition because they can both contribute to decarbonization. And there is a provision in Renewable Energy Directive where it states that member states can reduce the share of RFNBO, this is short for renewable hydrogen, by 20%, and thus creating a space in which low carbon hydrogen can be used.
Lavinia, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but you are still we still see the case for hydrogen in Europe slide.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me see if I can share some other way.
Maybe if you share the PowerPoint directly instead of sharing your window.
Yeah, is this okay?
Can you put it on full screen? It will be easier. Yes, okay? Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. So yeah, this is the discussion about Renewable Energy Directive and the provisions that were introduced to create a space for low carbon hydrogen. As mentioned, this was a positive element. And also in relation to Renewable Energy Directive, we have a delegated act. It is related to the accounting rules for hydrogen. So how do we know that the hydrogen that is used is coming from renewable sources? And this methodology is important because it requires to have new hydrogen, new solar and wind capacities to supply the hydrogen. This is so-called additionality principle. But even in this delegated act, there is a provision that leads to the same idea that nuclear and renewables should not be put into competition. And for energy systems that have a low emission intensity, which is set at 18 grams, the additionality principle does not apply, which means that they can use the existing renewable capacities to produce the hydrogen. So I know this is a very ambitious threshold and not many states can reach it, but it is again a recognition, a step into the right direction that there is a place and a necessity for nuclear hydrogen. I'm hoping you can see this slide now is the gas package. This is another piece of legislation that is currently in trialogues in the Council. This is important because it establishes the rules for the development of the hydrogen market and is related to infrastructure, to tariffs, to discounts, to policy for cross-border trade, and so on. So this is a very technical regulation and directive, but they also include low-carbon hydrogen. And although there is this idea to create a market for both, here, unfortunately, we are a bit debating about some different provisions. For example, tariff discounts. There are a number of member states that focus mainly on renewable, and they would like to have more advantageous conditions for renewable hydrogen. But on our side, the nuclear like-minded states, we are promoting an equal treatment for both these sources, which of course are very necessary. Now some information about the discussion on electricity market design and Net Zero Industry Act. They might not relate quite specifically to hydrogen, but electricity market design and Rizea, they both include nuclear, and they are relevant in our current discussion at Council level. Again, nuclear energy is covered, also building new projects, but also life extension projects. And it is important that EMD, electricity market design, gives a positive signal towards lifetime extension, which we all know are very cost-effective and easy and fast to implement projects that can contribute to security of supply. And also Net Zero Industry Act includes nuclear technologies, but there's still some work to be done because we want to ensure that they are covered under strategic net zero projects, which would mean that they could benefit from faster permitting and support for financial investments. Rizea actually is a reaction to IRA in the United States, and it tries to reindustrialize Europe. So it addresses manufacturing capacities, and we know there is quite a need to build up the industrial nuclear bases in Europe. And of course, an upcoming discussion, possibly we'll have some information tomorrow in the State of the Union report by President of the Commission, the 2040 climate targets, where we hope to have a different discussion about the complementarity between nuclear and low carbon renewable technologies, how we can reach the targets. Before going further, I have some information here about financing aspects. Of course, this might be interested for both renewable and nuclear technologies. There are also EU funds, but private financing, because the taxonomy, which was adopted last year, also includes production of hydrogen from nuclear. And at EU level, there are different platforms that have been created and support projects, guiding them through the application process in order to ensure that they are eligible for funding. So this might be interesting tools to look at. And also talking about financing, I will briefly mention the Hydrogen Bank, which was set up in March 2023. It is currently not including a possibility for nuclear hydrogen to participate, although member states like us, we are promoting this. But nuclear is mentioned as having a role in decarbonization. However, the role of the bank is more to cover the gap between the high cost of fossil-based hydrogen and the cost of renewable hydrogen, which is more expensive. So they will have a pilot auction in November. But again, this is an ongoing project, and we hope that nuclear will find its way there. Also, at international level, we are seeing a growing discussion and interest in third countries to develop their hydrogen production, and this is of importance for Europe, of course. We are concluding memorandums with countries that have or intend to have nuclear production, and we always support technology-neutral language. For example, Ukraine, South America, Republic of Korea, and so on. So this is also an aspect under discussion. And now briefly, I would like to refer to a case of Romania, where we have put forward a strategy which includes renewable and low carbon hydrogen. Of course, this is derived from our diversified energy mix. We have 18% of nuclear production in Romania, and plans to increase this capacity and also develop renewable and to some extent gas to bridge the gap after the phase out of fossil fuels in 2032. Of course, we have allocated some money from the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and low carbon hydrogen will play a part in this equation. We think that the strategy for hydrogen will be important to help decarbonize the economy, to support economic growth in hard-to-abate sectors. And here we have had a very good consultation with industry in preparing this strategy, to drive technological development and innovation, which is of course necessary and still needed for the hydrogen market, and to ensure energy security. Here is just a brief map of how we see the value chain, and I know we'll have more discussion in this webinar about this. We are looking at all the applications in heating, cooling, transport, heavy industry, and so on. So just a few brief numbers about how we see this complementarity. For example, in the industrial sector, we estimate that renewable hydrogen in 2030 will be 34.3 million tons, to which 6.6 million tons of low carbon hydrogen will be added. And together this will contribute to the reduction of significant reduction of CO2 emissions in Romania. We are looking also at the transport sector and a blend of hydrogen with natural gas in cogeneration facilities. And these are just a few figures that can demonstrate that there is a role for low carbon in even an actual economy to drive up development support for innovation and energy security. These were all my slides. I'm sorry for the technical problems, and I hope you were able to see them, and I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavinia, for your presentation. I think you gave us a very good overview of the policy updates in the European Union, like for two topics, nuclear on one hand and hydrogen nuclear on the other hand. Once again, for the audience, please feel free to share your questions at the chat. So we will go through all the questions at the Q&A session. We will go to the next presentation, but maybe a quick question to you, Lavinia. You mentioned gas package, and you mentioned that they are talking about the definition of low carbon hydrogen at the gas package. Do you have a timeline when this is going to be discussed, and when should we expect, let's say, outcome of the gas package?
Yeah, so the definition for low carbon hydrogen is already there, and it states that it should represent a 70% GHG emission reduction. So this, of course, is achievable by nuclear. And we know the Spanish presidency is pretty ambitious, so we believe that this file will be concluded in trialogues towards the end of this year. So there is this estimation, but I think it is feasible.
Great. I'm personally glad to hear that we are step by step moving slowly but surely to the definition of low carbon hydrogen. I think that will be a very good enabler for a lot of players to invest and move forward. So once again, thank you, Lavinia, for your presentation. Please stay with us. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and for sure we will have some questions on this topic. Now I will go to the next speaker, our guest from the United States. It's early morning there, so thank you, Levi Larsen, for joining us today. Please, yes, if you can turn on. Yes, thank you, Levi, for joining us. Levi is from INA, Idaho National Lab. They are actually a leader in the hydrogen, in nuclear, of course, but also in the hydrogen nuclear topic. Levi is an energy economist. So please, Levi, the floor is yours. Introduce yourself and share with us your thoughts on the IRA, how it impacted the hydrogen market. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share, and then I will get started. Okay, let me know if you are not able to see this or have any issues, if I have any issues advancing slides. So yeah, my name is Levi Larsen. I'm an energy economist at the Idaho National Laboratory. I kind of specialize in two areas of research at the moment. One is nuclear cost estimation. So how much does it cost for us to build a nuclear reactor? And the other is integrated energy systems. So how much does it cost to build a nuclear reactor and, for example, an electrolysis plant? And can you still be profitable when you do that? And those are kind of the two main areas of focus that I have. Now, obviously, I'm here to talk a little bit about how has the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, impacted clean hydrogen when it's coupled with nuclear power. Is it going to make it more? Is it going to make it more competitive? What does that look like in the U.S.? So just a brief summary of what the IRA looks like. Section 45V of the IRA creates a credit for the production of clean hydrogen. The way it's laid out, clean hydrogen is defined based off of CO2 emissions. So there's sort of a scale of CO2 emissions, and as you get lower, you qualify for more of the tax credit. On the high end, once you reach or surpass 4 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen, you no longer qualify for any portion of the tax credit. So the credit's about 10 years long, and the base credit is 60 cents a kilogram of hydrogen. But there's a 5x multiplier that's attached to that if you meet labor and project timing criteria, which generally we expect most to strive to qualify for. So that 60 cents a kilogram, once you add those multipliers, could actually be $3 a kilogram of hydrogen. $3 is not a trivial number. It has some significant implications in terms of who wants to get involved in the hydrogen market. This is a sort of mapping of what the hydrogen PTC or production tax credit would look like based off of different carbon emissions. So on this graph, on the bottom x-axis, you have carbon emission in terms of kilograms of CO2 per kilograms of hydrogen. On the y-axis, you're looking at the quantity of PTC that a given nuclear-powered hydrogen system could qualify for. So obviously, the key thing here is, actually, I don't know if people can see my my cursor, but if not, I'll try to describe it better. On the x-axis, oh, you can, perfect. When you get to 0.4, you see that you below 0.4 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen, you qualify for the full tax credit. So the green line here is the PTC with your multiplier. The blue line is it without the multiplier. And again, we've looked at, there's been some modeling by A&L with the GREET model that suggests that nuclear powered hydrogen is going to meet these CO2 requirements, and it is going to qualify for those $3 a kilogram. There's other technologies that will also qualify for this, right? So renewables are definitely going to be able to qualify for the full credit. There is some indication that steam methane reforming via natural gas or coal-produced hydrogen, if you add carbon capture sequestration, may qualify for some portion of these credits. They may be more down here at the lower end at 50 cents to $1. But there is an expectation that there could be fossil fuel systems that add carbon capture, and they qualify for that. So with low CO2 emissions, there's kind of no question that nuclear powered electrolysis in this instance is going to be able to enter the market and potentially be a disruptor there. But then it kind of begs the question of how much. So it's very easy for us to say we're going to produce hydrogen, and if we sell it at the right price point, then we're going to make money. But there's a broader question that you have to answer as an economist, which is there anyone to even buy it? So if we add this $3 a kilogram tax credit and everybody wants to produce hydrogen, there has to be enough people to actually purchase it. So current demand in the United States is roughly 12 million metric tons per year. And Argonne National Laboratory has done some modeling that projects the potential future demand by the year 2050 to be close to 120 million metric tons. Now, I'm going to caveat this and make sure we understand that this 120 million metric tons is sort of an upper bound number. They're saying if we took a bunch of industries and they all completely adopted and it could be produced at the right price point, we could potentially see demand of 120 million metric tons, so 10x by 2050. What goes into that? Well, it's first and foremost cost, right? Can these industries replace whatever technology or whatever they're using now in place of hydrogen? Can they replace that with cost-effective hydrogen so it doesn't have a massive impact on their bottom line? And then the other is how motivated are some of these industries to decarbonize? You'll see that currently hydrogen in the U.S. is predominantly driven by one or two or three sectors. Ammonia is a major factor there. Refineries use a lot of hydrogen. But this 120 million metric tons projection includes multiple industries that don't use a lot of hydrogen right now. So you have light and heavy duty vehicles. There's the concept of supplementing the natural gas supply, using it for seasonal storage, synthetic hydrocarbons, metal refining, biofuels, etc. So this 120 number is essentially giving us the upper bound and saying, if everybody does buy in, we expect the cap could be something close to 120 million metric tons. The other thing to be cognizant that people are looking at now in the United States is what does local demand look like? Hydrogen demand in the US tends to be very grouped. So if I'm a nuclear power plant off in, say, Oregon, right, in the northeast of the United States, is there anybody in the northeast that actually wants hydrogen, or am I going to have to ship that a long ways away? So location is also a factor here. It's not just what is the demand in the country, it's what's the demand in the locality. Now, you can take those demand numbers that we looked at previously, and you can actually map them to threshold prices that Argonne produced in their 2020 report. And you essentially say, for each of those industries, how much demand of hydrogen could they have? And then you say, what's the threshold price, or what's the minimum price that this industry would require hydrogen to be sold at for them to actually buy in? And you produce this quasi-demand curve that we see here, where you have threshold price on the x-axis and potential clean hydrogen demand in million metric tons per year on the y-axis. And obviously, as one would expect, you see that as the price of clean hydrogen decreases, the demand increases, right? You're seeing more industries that want to buy into this. We've mapped current demand at 12 million metric tons here in this kind of dotted line. But there's a few things to point out. So if we can get the price of hydrogen down to $2 a kilogram, clean hydrogen down to $2 a kilogram, we could almost 4x the current demand levels, which is quite significant. The other thing to call out is if it gets down to a very convenient number of $0 a kilogram, you see demand kind of start to explode. And there's certain industries that Argonne essentially said, you have to sell this at zero for these industries to buy in, which, you know, hypothetically could be possible when you're looking at production tax credits and subsidization. But it's also worthwhile to point out that that's probably not realistic, right? We're not going to get to a zero hydrogen price, at least not in the near term. So in the near term, nuclear powered hydrogen facilities can kind of look at these sort of quasi-demand curve and say, hey, you know, how much demand do we think we could see in the country? But then again, keeping in mind, how much demand does there exist locally? Okay, so the next question you have to answer from an economic standpoint is, all right, we can produce hydrogen. There's some incentive because there's a PTC. We know there's going to be an increase of demand, and we have sort of a rough approximation of where we think that demand is going to go. But the next question is, can we actually compete with what is being sold on the market? Because unless we can compete with current technologies and current prices, then no one will buy your hydrogen. And PTCs actually make clean hydrogen pretty competitive. So this is a mapping of steam methane reforming levelized cost of hydrogen against high temperature steam electrolysis. So on this graph, you're looking at electricity price on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, you're looking at a levelized cost of hydrogen. So there's two things plotted here. One is the steam methane reforming LCOH, or levelized cost of hydrogen numbers, and it's mapped using sort of average, high, and low EIA natural gas price projections. So if natural gas price is particularly high, then you can expect it to, you know, correlate to this line. If it's low, it's this line, and average, it's this line here, right? Which makes sense as natural gas becomes more or less expensive, because in the United States, over 90% of all hydrogen is produced via steam methane reforming. It essentially changes the market price. So so high temperature electrolysis or low temperature electrolysis have to be able to compete with those numbers. And this allows us to see a sensitivity of what the expected LCOEs might be if natural gas prices change in the future. Now, the reason why you're seeing these kind of linear estimations of high temperature steam electrolysis is because we want to understand, as power prices change, how does that impact the levelized cost of hydrogen? It has to be advantageous for a nuclear plant to sell hydrogen more so than it is to just connect to the grid and sell power. So as the price of electricity goes up, so does your opportunity cost in selling hydrogen. But there's a key takeaway here. Keep in mind that the PTC is $3 per kilogram of hydrogen. The levelized cost, at least as it's shown in this graph, doesn't actually hit $3 a kilogram. So you can take these lines which are unsubsidized lines, right? This is an INL and an HTFO record estimate for what they think steam electrolysis would look like. And some may argue that, maybe these lines are overly optimistic. Even with that in mind, you would take these lines and you would shift them down, maybe not all the way to zero, because maybe there's a profit margin that has to be associated with this. But these lines are being dropped drastically. And it becomes very apparent that across a range of electricity prices and a range of potential future natural gas prices, that clean hydrogen from nuclear-powered steam electrolysis is very competitive. In fact, it might be able to blow steam methane reforming out of the water in terms of its ability to compete on a levelized cost basis. So we've answered a few questions here. The first we've said is, can nuclear qualify for the subsidy? Yes, it can, right? Will there actually be an increase in demand? Yes, there will be. And we have some rough approximation of what that would look like. And then finally, can you actually compete with the competitors in the market, i.e. steam methane reforming? And that answer too seems to be kind of a resounding absolutely. Which is why currently you're seeing some nuclear power hydrogen first movers. So here is 4 examples of utility-specific plants that are actually developing pilot projects, one of which has already launched, others that are still being developed in the United States. So we have Energy Harbor with the David Bessie Nuclear Power Plant Station. You have Prairie Island with Xcel Energy. You have Palo Verde, which is APS. And then you have the Nine Mile Point Nuclear Station. These deployments, span from less than 1 megawatt to roughly 20 megawatts. And they include both high temperature steam electrolysis and low temperature electrolysis. So there's obviously increased interest in additional locations besides these ones, but the fact that you're already seeing first movers in the United States is very promising. And finally, there's areas of additional interest across the industry. With our work at INL, we have begun producing models that allow companies to understand what is the business case associated with producing hydrogen, just how much of a return can I get? And we've started to kind of dial those in for specific utilities. INL, NPR, and NEI are currently working on a report that investigates the potential for existing reactors to carry out uprates and then use that incremental power to produce hydrogen. And there's also been multiple generic nuclear-powered hydrogen tools that are being developed with targeted release in 2023. So it really is quite promising. And we think that IRA has had a significant impact in how hydrogen has been received by the industry, the amount of interest that's being showed, and that there will be a lot more nuclear-powered hydrogen being produced in the future.
Thank you, Levi, for those great insights, and also thank you for having respected the time allocated. We really appreciate that. I think there are some comments on the chat, but maybe a quick question to you, Levi. From an European perspective, we are watching IRA as a real game changer for the hydrogen in general, and for, of course, nuclear and hydrogen. And we wanted to hear from you, like a year after the IRA has been launched, almost a year since the IRA has been voted. We wanted to hear, like, let's say, your impression since then. Do you really believe that IRA has accelerated or, let's say, changed the landscape and has opened door for newcomers and new movers and new investors? And do you believe, like, if Europe, let's say, maybe that's the second question. Let's start by the first question, please, Levi.
Yeah, no, totally. It's a great question. Is this going to do anything? So I've been pretty heavily involved in a lot of the profitability modeling at INL for nuclear-powered hydrogen, and the returns look fantastic. They look they look so good that it's not that surprising that you're seeing that much increased interest from utilities. Anytime you introduce a subsidy that's this big, it's going to be a game changer. And we see this as a very positive thing. The Department of Energy already had sort of a target for a hydrogen economy. And this was exactly what was needed to get first movers on clean hydrogen, to get more companies to invest in it, to encourage more movement into that space. So yeah, we think it's been very, very positive. It's important to note that not everything's been hashed out. There are aspects of the IRA that aren't totally clear. There's still some questions on additionality. There's still some things that have to be kind of figured out from the IRS standpoint. But regardless, people are moving forward. They are continuing to look at this. And we at ILNL have noticed increased interest, and we suspect that with similar types of legislation, the same would happen in Europe.
Yeah, we hope so. That's actually what we all hope here, because we believe that the IRA has been attracting more and more players to go and get set in the United States, and that's actually what we would love to have in Europe as well. Because we do need Europe to invest in hydrogen and nuclear, because we have the same questions to solve here. So my second question, I will leave it to the Q&A session. So we will talk about that later on, Levi, but really appreciate your contribution and all those great insights. Let's then move to the next speaker. It's a colleague based in Europe, working for Framatome Covalent, and she will tell us a little bit more about feasibility studies happening right now in Europe. So Janet, welcome to our webinar, and the floor is yours. No. Please introduce yourself and share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayman. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Canet Serin, and I'm a project manager in the field of hydrogen. I'm working at Covalent, which is a brand, a spin-off for hydrogen technologies and battery storage of Framatome. And today I'm going to talk about the topic nuclear-produced hydrogen, feasibility and challenges, and will introduce you to the project NPHyCo. Can you all see my screen? I think so. Okay. Okay, perfect. So I prepared the agenda for today. So first of all, like I said, I'm going to introduce you to the project NPHyCo. Then I will show you the current challenges in this project, and then I'm here to answer all your questions. So what is NPHyCo? So first of all, NPHyCo stands for Nuclear-Powered Hydrogen Cogeneration, and it's a European research project dedicated to the production of hydrogen from nuclear power. This project will also be funded by Euratom Research and Training Program. I think it's familiar to the most of you. And yeah, we started last year in September. So we started September 2022. And this project will run for 2.5 years. So until end of February of 2025. In this project, we have different partners across Europe, and in total, including us as Framatome, we are 12 partners. Like, for example, Tecnatom is one of the partners from Spain, or Energy from Netherlands, and we have Ansaldo from Italy, or for example, the Technical University of Dresden from Germany. So like I said, we are across, so the whole partners are across Europe. So what is the challenge? As most of you may know, European Union is aiming the full decarbonization of the European economy by the year 2050, so in 17 years. And the question is here is hydrogen could be a part of the solution. Potentially, yes, but so far, most of the hydrogen produced in Europe comes from fossil fuels. So the challenge is, how can Europe ramp up production of low carbon hydrogen? How can Europe produce to meet the demand and ensure it is affordable? That's why I want to continue with the project goals of this project, so of NPHyCo. So NPHyCo is focusing on the potential for developing large-scale, low-carbon hydrogen production facilities linked to nuclear power plants in Europe. We started by assessing the feasibility of producing hydrogen near an existing nuclear power plant, and of course also the added value of such a project. We are also looking for potential locations where pilot plants or a pilot project could be built. Yes, these are the project goals of NPHyCo. And my next slide, I want to show you the work packages in this project. So actually in total, we have 7 work packages. The last work package is not listed here. It's the project management and coordination, so work package 7. But yes, I want to show you the work packages. So the first work package is the conceptualization. In this work package, we are identifying the needs and the benefits hydrogen produced from nuclear. So yeah, it's focusing on the conceptualization of the project. This work package is also almost finished. Our second work package is the technical roadmap. Here we are looking, for example, at the needs of a hydrogen plant, and also, for example, the interactions between the 2 facilities. Then we have the work package 3. This is the economic roadmap. Here we are looking, for example, at the economic feasibility of such a project, also estimating potential costs and also revenues. So the aim is here to develop a business plan. Then we have the work package 4. This is the licensing roadmap. Here we are focusing on licensing requirements, like, for example, identifying the key licensing issues to be considered when planning a hydrogen facility coupled to a nuclear power plant. Then we have the work package 5. It's the implementation roadmap. Here, the aim is here to put forward proposals for pilot plant locations and also their layout. And then we have the last work package. It's about the communication, dissemination, and public awareness. So it's about the communication in the project. Here, for example, we are also identifying potential education and training needs. So like I said, this is the work packages in this project, and we also have the work package 7, which is the project management and coordination. So in my next slide, you can see the timeline of this project. So you see on the left side the leaders of the work packages and also of the tasks. Then you can see the work packages and the different tasks. So for example, Framatome, so us, we are responsible for work package 2 and for work package 7. The red line is where we are standing right now. So you can see it's been 12 months, so 1 year already in the project. We delivered already some of the deliverables, but still lots of milestones and deliverables are coming. We have a different project meetings. And for example, tomorrow we have the governance board meeting where all of the partners are coming to Germany, and we are meeting for 2 days here in Germany with all the partners, and we will do a workshop where we are looking at what is going well, what is not going on well, and we'll discuss about different topics. Yes. So now I want to tell you more about the current challenges regarding the project NPHyCo. So one issue we have is the technical issue. So it's challenging us which electrolyzer type we should use in this project. We are looking here at the 3 main electrolyzer types. So alkaline electrolyzer systems, PEM, and high temperature. But I will show in the next slide some more information to this topic. Then our next challenge is, so in this project, we are trying to get in touch with the nuclear power plants in Europe. And some of them are not convinced that are not convinced of this project regarding economical licensing and safety points. So they're, for example, thinking it's not a good investment, or they're thinking it's not allowed to build a hydrogen plant close or next to a nuclear power plant, or they're thinking it's dangerous. So it's hard for us to convince them, if they're thinking it's not a good idea. But also, it's challenging us to get feedback from nuclear power plants, so if they're interested or not, but also, moreover, to receive data of the nuclear power plants. So in this project, we prepared 2 questionnaires, one economical, one technical questionnaire, in order to get some data of the nuclear power plants, in order, for example, to calculate a business plan based on this data. But it's also challenging to receive this because some of the nuclear power plants need a lot of time, or they have problems to send us this data. But nevertheless, we are still in contact with some nuclear power plants. And I think, as I know, we also received from 2 up to 3 nuclear power plants some data. So although it's challenging us, it's still going on. Yes, so I want to give more information on the first point I told to you with the electrolyzer types. So like I said, we are looking at the 3 main electrolyzer types. So it's PEM, alkaline, and high temperature electrolyzer. So alkaline electrolyzer are the most mature and the most durable hydrogen generation systems nowadays. The PEM electrolyzers, on the other hand, provide several benefits over alkaline, such as the flexible operation. PEM electrolyzers are also the most compact in size. Also, they are the more suitable for operation with renewable energy sources, which might be very important for the future. We also have the high temperature electrolyzers. Is also a very promising technology, but it has not yet been commercialized. The major advantage of this method is its high electrical efficiency. So as you can see, all 3 have different advantages and also different disadvantages. Like, for example, the alkaline the alkaline electrolyzer requires lots of space and also has a high cold startup time, 3,600 seconds. PEM electrolyzer just needs 30 seconds. So like I said, all of them has advantages and disadvantages. That's why it's challenging for us to decide which one would be the best for this project. Yes, so I'm finished with my presentation, and thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer all your questions, also with my colleagues Sven and Martin, who are also joining.
Thank you, Janet, for your slides and those insights. Thank you for telling us a little bit more about the NPHyCo project. It is the first one funded by Euratom, considering the topic of nuclear hydrogen. So that's actually a prestigious project. Congratulations for that project. And we do have some questions, but I will ask the audience to share the questions on the Q&A so we can go through all of them. But a quick question to you, Janet. Can you remind us actually who are the other partners? I think Framatome is leading the project. I personally know that Technatom is part of that project because Technatom is part of Westinghouse. But who else is in this project? That's my first question, and then maybe I have another one, please.
Yes. So, like you said, we as Framatome are leading this project. We are responsible also for the whole coordination of the project. But I have here a slide where you can see all the project partners. Like I said, we are 12 partners in this project, all across Europe. So we have Ansaldo from Italy, CAA from France, CVR from Czech Republic, European Commission, Covalent, GRS, Energy Safety Group from the Ukraine, Hunatom from Hungary, US Nuclear Europe, Energy, Technical University of Dresden, and Technatom. So yes, these are all the partners in this project who are working in each work package.
Yeah, great. Michael from the chat, he's saying that there are other projects happening in Europe regarding considering nuclear and hydrogen. Yes, I confirm. And there is one that you are not listing here, is the EDF feasibility study in UK. So yes, I think the Covalent, the Framatome project led. It's an interesting feasibility study, exhaustive. My second question, you are mentioning 3 technologies: alkaline, PEM, and SOEC. And are you considering the heat? Like when you are talking about nuclear power plants, are you also considering heat to be used to produce hydrogen, or you are only focusing on electricity as per the policy of today in Europe?
So no, actually we have in the conceptualization work package, we have different cases. I think now we have 9 cases where we want to use more of the nuclear power plant beside of the electricity. So we are, like I said, considering also this, and also we have 9 different cases.
Okay, so thank you, Janet, for those insights. We will go back to the Q&A session at the end, so hopefully we'll have more and more question. We will now move to the next speaker. Is Chris Lefrère, based in Belgium. He's going to be speaking on behalf of end users and heavy industry people. So he will tell us a little bit about insights on the end users' demand and how nuclear hydrogen can be supporting and useful. So Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Ayman. Good afternoon or morning. Can you see my slide, my first slide? Ayman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There we go. And you see things moving?
Yes.
That's great. All right. So I'm Christopher. I work as an engineer. I'm an electromechanical engineer, information technology and stuff like that. Since 3 years, I work with WaterstofNet as a project manager, and it's a team. an organization in Belgium, a non-governmental organization which works since 13 years on stimulating the hydrogen economy in the Benelux. We have performed since 2009 more than 36 projects. We have 20 running projects on actually building concrete things in the hydrogen domain. We have a hydrogen academy. We do quite some studies on hydrogen for public authorities, and we run the Belgian Hydrogen Council. But most important of all to remember is that we are an association of companies, of industrial companies, manufacturing companies, from the smallest components to the biggest systems and service providers in the domain of hydrogen in the Benelux. I myself, I'm active in the IEA HYN task force, so hydrogen produced with nuclear energy, where within the hydrogen TCP within IEA, we look at the hydrogen production systems, the products and services, the business case, and so on. That's a very interesting place to be active if you really want to build and start working on concrete projects in this domain. Now, I'm going to talk about two things. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities from an industry perspective? So we are an industry association, and we're coming from the hydrogen angle. And that means that we look at it from an industry perspective. And when you look at it from an industry perspective, first of all, we see that, especially in the EU, and we're faced with three main challenges for the industry, especially the industry that consumes a lot of energy. It's the electricity supply risk. Yes, indeed. It's an increasing risk that we are subject to. We have the issue of non-competitive energy costs, and the difference with other continents is mounting. And finally, yes, indeed, the industry needs zero carbon hydrogen to decarbonize several processes which cannot be decarbonized with electricity or low temperature. Now, in the challenges in going on that road, the first of all is that in the central of Europe, the cost of hydrogen production, domestic or local, better said, production of hydrogen is quite high. And the basic reason for that is one, there's of course a very limited opportunity of renewables in very densely populated areas and far away from the seas and so on. And that makes that there the utilization, the capacity utilization of the electrolyzer becomes low, and that the cost becomes high. And so the only really interesting place in Europe to be active in electrolyzing is somewhere in the North Sea, and electrolyze in the North Sea. That's a very efficient place to do it and cost effective. Or use hydropower in the north of Europe, or to use solar power in the south of Europe. But in the heart of Europe, where you also have the center of gravity of the industry today, due to the EU RED II regulation, also, and the delegated act, which is a kind of a more detailed specification of when can you turn on an electrolyzer or not. The consequence of that is that when you look at Germany, for example, and you use grid electricity, even at a low cost of 20 euro per megawatt hour, you end up with a very high cost of hydrogen per kilo. Now, another challenge is that if we follow the calculations, 80% of hydrogen will have to be imported in 2030, more than 50% in 2050. That means that, there's a massive need of import, and that also entails geopolitical issues and extra costs of transporting the hydrogen to Europe. And when we look at some studies that compare different alternatives, local production versus import and different technologies, there you see that in fact the transport surplus cost very easily, I would say, kills the cost benefit of producing like solar in the northern part of Africa, Middle East, or Chile or Australia and so on. So import will not fundamentally decrease the cost for Central European countries. So fortunately, we have some opportunities thanks to nuclear energy. And I was a bit flabbergasted when Levi said a moment ago that there were some fantastic returns. Of course, thanks to IRA. But next to that, we think that indeed it might not be fantastic without an IRA, but it might be great enough to move on. And one important thing out of the hydrogen community is to clarify that on one hand, on the left, we have the alkaline and the PEM electrolyzer technologies, which fully rely on electricity for their hydrogen production, but that we have two other important categories. So the solid oxide electrolysis technology, where, and these are, let's say, ballpark figures, you can reduce your electricity need by 25% if you can use the heat of a nuclear reactor. And the same with thermochemical water splitting. There's even more reverse. There, 75% of the energy could come from the nuclear reactor heat, and only 25% electricity left is needed to produce, but then more in a chemical process, the required hydrogen. A second very important thing is that given the increase of intermittent and the priority of an intermittent on the grid, the slack capacity on a nuclear power plant is increasing, and which means that capacity can be used to do something else than just produce nothing. And as we can see from the IAEA slides, there are so many applications possible, and hydrogen and desalination are really very hot topics in the industry these days. There's been made a calculation based on the Devil's Canyon nuclear power plant, where they calculated how much money could we make from 1 megawatt hour of heat coming from a nuclear power plant, because basically that's the basic energy form that comes out of such a plant. And there the result was that $3 for electricity, $7 for hydrogen, and $21 for desalination. Another very interesting evolution is our small modular reactors. Not so much because they are small, because small means less economies of scale, but the most important and interesting aspect is the modularity of it. It's being produced, or the core of the reactor being produced in a factory, which means you can better control the quality. You have all your engineers and technicians on one location in the world. You don't need to have a traveling circus going around the world to build all those large reactors, and you can ship them where you need them, of course, where there is water to ship them to. You need a limited number of experts. You need one team worldwide to produce them. And you can also have a very flexible way in building up your capacity of your nuclear power plant. That's a third very important element, because what we often hear is the fundability of nuclear power is the big threshold step that you need to take to 10-20 billion to have a huge massive 1.6 gigawatt power plant. With these ASMRs, the modularity, and so the flexibility of your capex build up in function of the demand is very important. Another important evolution in the design of nuclear power plants is the passive safety, which is a major leap forward in how also the public perceives the safety of a nuclear power plant. And another very interesting evolution is the recuperation or the recycling of used fuel. We're all talking about a circular economy. Well, there are on the left side you see how many tons of reusable or recyclable fuel is available in several countries. If we could use that, I remember a calculation in France where somebody said, well, if we do that and we only use our existing waste and we would recycle it, we could continue for 30 years our current level of electricity production. Another very important thing is it's not something that's happening just in one country. There are many countries around the world where you have projects and initiatives starting up, and that's very important also for the financial world and the investors to join initiatives like that. Another very important point is that it seems to be able to reduce the cost below even imported. or a locally produced renewable energy, which means that it is a very good tool to reduce dramatically the geopolitical dependency of a country or a continent from importing those 80% of zero carbon hydrogen from elsewhere. And then we don't even take into account the right-hand side of the slide, which means that due to intermittent energy sources, the nuclear generates a marginal, in fact, indirect cost. You have indirect costs for grid capacity that you need to upgrade, but you underutilize it. Solar power plants, on average, uses 10% of its peak capacity and is delivered effectively. Onshore wind, 20%, a third to 40% for offshore wind, which means you need an over-dimensioning of your grid, and not only your transport grid, but also your distribution grid. You need backup power in case there is no wind, there is no solar. That's also a cost which you have to take into account. And then you have underutilization costs of all those infrastructures. And there we see a massive difference between the nuclear power, which we can control, which we can manage, and the intermittent forms of power generation. Another very important aspect for nuclear is where you are in places where you don't have lots of opportunities for renewables. When you are in the heart of Europe or the eastern part of Europe, it might be very difficult to have a positive business case based on wind. If you're enough to the south, you might have a good business case with solar, but when you go up a bit or go to the center, it's more difficult also to have a good return on investment on your solar investment. And so nuclear there can fill in the gap in terms of return on investment, positive business cases. And finally, there is something, there's a tsunami coming, and we in the hydrogen world, we are very well aware of that because we are working with that almost every day, and that is the tsunami of the emission trading system certificate costs. How much euro do you need to pay to close your gap between the best available technology and your technology for what you do? How much do you have to pay per ton of CO2 to compensate that? And there you see that, okay, thanks to ETS, the emissions of the power sector in the EU decreased. That's a good thing. But on the other hand, we see that the cost of a permit or a certificate per ton of CO2 is exploding, I would say. I'm not exaggerating. You see here in the middle, Cambridge econometrics, and they say, okay, it will go to 180 euro in 2030. But the more recent study this year of the IFV Kiel Institute in Germany, they simulated 300 euro per ton of CO2, which means that if you are in the steel industry or another industry, you are very energy intensive and you don't have the best of industry operation, you will have to take care of a huge CO2 cost. Voilà, this was a bit of view from the industrial side and the consumer side of energy and from the hydrogen side. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for the slides, for the insights, but also for respecting the time. I really appreciate. So maybe a quick question to you, Chris. Now we understand the vision of an end user, heavy industry end users regarding hydrogen. Maybe a clear question: what are the pains that heavy industry people are facing today regarding hydrogen, and that nuclear hydrogen can help to solve?
Well, it's of course indeed the availability of zero carbon or zero emission hydrogen, or clean hydrogen, whatever your definition or your terminology is, and to have it fast enough available and at a reliable cost for a long period of time in the future. Industries, they have their own investments take 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You have industrial installations, and when you want to do a new investment or an expansion investment on such an installation, you are not looking for just 5 or 10 years, you're looking for decades ahead. And so to make your business case robust, you need, as the important cost factor there in the business case being energy, you need a stable, predictable at least, and competitive curve of your energy cost of your plant that you're building to produce ammonia or steel or whatever. And today that's not the case. Today there's a lot of uncertainty about what will be the cost of green electricity in 5 years, of electricity as a whole even. Will it be enough available and so on. And so there are all those aspects that nuclear for electricity, but also for hydrogen can bring to the table. Bring again to the table a long-term plan with a stable cost basis, which is competitive on a global scale and which you can predict over a long period of time as an industry. And then you can make your investment knowing that that line in your business case is predictable enough to make the investment, for your board to make the investment, and not to say, yeah, it has a huge swing factor. We're not going to do this because it could be the bankruptcy of our company if we invest in that.
Great answer, Chris. So in other words, what a heavy industry person is looking for is a visibility, long-term visibility, a commitment of a source of energy that is low carbon with a very nice, let's say predictable, competitive price, so they can invest. So let's be clear, we're not here to criticize renewable energy hydrogen. We are saying that it's complementary with nuclear hydrogen on the same time. Yes. So thank you, Chris, for those thoughts. We will for sure have some questions. There are questions to you. You can go to the chat, and we will be back to the question sessions at Q&A. So moving right now to last but not least, our last and not least guest, Luc from CAPGEMINI. Thank you, Luc, for joining us. Luc is based in Morocco. I think we all know what happened in Morocco. So a lot of thoughts to the people of Morocco and the victims of the earthquake. So, Luc, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours. Please tell us a little bit more about a vision of a third-party independent consultant company about nuclear and hydrogen. We are looking for an agnostic and neutral opinion. So please go ahead. Thank you, Luc.
First of all, I'm very happy to be here with you today. So first question, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I played it a bit. I picked up some words that have been shared by Lavinia, Levi, Serin, and Chris. So I picked up the importance of aligning offer and demand, the strategy to cover all the hydrogen applications from industrial to mobility. From Levi, qualification realistic. I like this word. And is hydrogen very competitive? Okay. From Serin, the different technologies that we have, and I picked up a lot of keywords from Chris. Central Europe is the center of gravity for industry. 50% of hydrogen will be imported by 2050. Transport kills the benefits. SMR importance on modularity. The recycling economy, reusability is important. Effectiveness, ROI, CO2 cost, predictable, stability, uncertainty. So all the kind of keywords that I'm planning to reuse on my, as you said, amen, external view. We are CAPGEMINI. We are not producing electrolyzer and planning to sell any gram of CO2, but we are, I think, part of any domain of the value chain. So, my slide is frozen. Starts. Okay. So three slides. Wow, are we there? So everybody, I think, knows CAPGEMINI as a very important IT company, but we are not just delivering IT. So we acquired Altron a couple of years ago, and we are now more than 60,000 engineers within this big IT company. Focusing product and system engineering, digital and software, we'll come back to that, and industrial operations. So I'll share the slides. So, and coming back on nuclear, so I got some very important feedback from Denis, our nuclear CTO. We are present and we are close to, I think, most of the stakeholders. Okay, hydrogen. So I'll try to demonstrate why it's important to have a global view of the value chain. I will stay focused on 4 messages, and I have a paper here not to forget anything. First of all, when you are talking about hydrogen, nothing is new. Really, nothing is new. This is not like quantum, okay? Nothing is new. The first fuel cell, 1838. The first electrolyzer, 1800. Nothing is new. Everything is possible, and everything is feasible. Is it affordable? This is another question. Devil hides into details, and I'll try to stay focused on this point. And last but not least, what's a business opportunity? For me, two sets of business opportunities. The business opportunities that are enabling you to make money or to save money. And I think the real world is a mix of that. You're going to blue oceans, and at the same time, you have to comply with the regulations, else you'll pay fees and so on. So, importance of considering the whole value chain. Within CAPGEMINI, let's say two sets of offers, supporting the customer in strategy and innovation and governance. And we have experts on IRA and so on, and probably Levi, you met some of them in Houston, for example. So helping the customer to have a vision, and what you said, Chris, helping the customer to predict and make the good choice. I'll come back on some example on mobility where some choices might be not that good. And out of that, second domain is industry, the domain I'm coming from, supporting the customer to design, manufacture, and so on, and train the people, because in terms of experience, we are lacking lots of hydrogen expertise in the market. Second, out of the product, considering the operations of the product, because the key, and I come back in 1 second, the TCO as ROI, but the TCO is really the key. And to support that, the digital. You might know that in any of the systems we mentioned since 1 hour, a little bit more than that, electrolyzer, pipelines, nuclear, you have plenty of data. But are those data available? No. Because most of the time stakeholders are conscious about the importance and the possibility to valorize those data, but because of IP control and so on, they are not sharing. And for us, sometimes it happens interesting for both customers, sometimes very close, sometimes within the same JV, to have a third party, agnostic, capable to manage data without trying to retain IP or build IP or something like that. So digital is key when the question is optimizing and keeping the systems effective from industrial perspective, performance and so on, and from economical perspective. This is the key. If you are missing one dimension, you're dead. It's a way to simple slide, but to put some names and some domains on the value chain. So let's say on the left, you have people producing hydrogen, eventually synthetic fuels, but this is not the story of today. And on the right side, people through applications, and two big applications, what we call industrial application, methanol, ammonia, steel, ports, refineries, and so on, and mobility. And 2 out of the 4 persons who came before me made the glue. I'm not convinced that if we want to be effective, that we have to consider those two markets that are very different. Okay, so now for us the key is total cost of ownership. Let's example, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about mobility because it's easier. Okay, investments are smaller, lots of initiatives, because from political perspective it's quite positive. The social acceptance is great, is important. A lot of things are currently running. So you heard that Alstom, that ran the first hydrogen train in Germany, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the lander said, I'm stopping the hydrogen train because I made studies, and at the end, an electrical train using battery, storing electricity on battery, is more effective for me. So I'm stopping the hydrogen. And maybe you got that in Liverpool 2 weeks ago. In fact, the Liverpool city bought a fleet of hydrogen bus. They had to stop the fleet. Why? They were missing hydrogen. So when something is going wrong on the value chain, on the upper part of the value chain, you might be on the very serious trouble, and you might waste a lot of money because having made not the good choice. So total cost of ownership is key. The cost of what? The cost of everything. Cost to engineer, cost to operate, cost to transport, and we'll come back in a second. So nowadays, the present time is to experiment and test. We need to do that first. We need to do that because, I said before, everything is existing, but you have to align the planets. You have eventually to make a selection on technology, eventually improve the technology to be sure that you're building something which is feasible but affordable. Okay, again, in terms of the TCO. China will come. Definitely China will come. For some opportunities that will be very complex for them, for some other that won't be that complex. So China will come. So people having the capability to lower down the price massively will come back, and we need to be prepared on that. And challenge is effectiveness. In our side, what do we have? Some experience in H2, some experience on the systems, and some capability to valorize the data. Key questions and objectives. Open questions. Is it to optimize the current nuclear plants by better balancing offer and demand? Because as you know, nowadays we don't have the real tools and means to store huge amount of electricity. You have capacitors, eventually battery, and we are using that. But question is to store huge amount, we don't have. And hydrogen definitively is capable to do that. Again, it's feasible. Is it affordable? Because things are massively are costing a lot, and we'll come back in 1 second. Or is it to valorize some what I call the waste, like heat, for example? Might be both, okay? But anytime you are having somebody saying, I want to recycle, I want to use the waste, alarm has to come in front of you, because most of the time you have to spend some energy, some time, and some money to purify the waste. So personally, when I'm having somebody in front of me, it's magical, but because you will be capable to reuse the waste, be careful. Reuse, yes, but what kind of additional operation should I have to perform to have the good quality of the waste? And sometimes it can change the game. So is it to address the decarbonized hydrogen market at contents flow, cheapest cost? Reading nuclear domain. And from which usage? Industrial applications, process decarbonation, green materials, mobility. And what's the best solution to optimize CapEx? Is it to assemble and coupling high power nuclear plants with high power electrolyzer? So the pipelines are there, but the big and large electrolyzer are not. And so you have to invest a lot to design those products and to manufacture them. And the capex is very high. Definitively, when compared with using with renewable, definitively nuclear, you have the constant flow of electricity which is coming. Or is it to have on both sides a cluster of smallest nuclear power plants like HMR, VHR, and so on, and in front of them some cluster of mid-size electrolyzer? Okay, but there the question is on the supervision. Definitely, you can be agile, you can adjust offer and demand and optimize capex and your costs and so on, but you have to be capable to adjust real time, meaning capable to predict, else taking a huge amount of risk. So that drives to some specific question for new nuclear. What kind of reactor technology is the most interesting to produce cheap hydrogen and clean hydrogen? What power range is the most efficient to produce hydrogen with an electrolyzer? Depends the model. Is it possible that it's effective to retrieve waste heat from nuclear to supply high temperature electrolyzer? Coming back to my alarm on the waste, what do I have to do with this heat, which is in vapor, or okay, water vapor? Do you have to add some additional process to be capable to use this energy? In terms of nuclear safety, should new factor to be considered when you are having a huge amount of compressed hydrogen close to this kind of facility? Is the VHR a good candidate to produce heat in order to supply an electrolyzer? Could the nuclear reactor power multiple electrolyzer? Again, answer is yes, but what's the complexity of the system, the reliability, and what's the cost? Is a modular reactor an interesting technology for producing hydrogen? It seems that yes, minus the fact that things might not be that simple. And could reactors dedicated to hydrogen production be built on industrial site? Going back on safety. So lots of questions. I'm going a little bit deep on the technology. So many ways to produce hydrogen, and some of them are used for decades and 100 years. So a lot of different technologies. Definitely will focus on electrolyzers. Let me use the. Oops, sorry. This is not what I'm planning to do. Yes, pointer laser. Okay, so we'll come back on the electrolyzer, but there are many other technologies to produce. And here you have two keywords: efficiency from an industrial and engineering perspective, and cost, to address the other dimension that has to be always taken into account, the cost. And as you can see, it can vary a lot. Okay, and this cost is what? Is it the cost as the user level, or is it at just at the output of the electrolyzer or the machine? Because in between you have the transport. So in terms of electrolyzer, it has been said many times, of different kind. Alkaline, very mature, okay, but some limitations. And you have the high temperature electrolyzers, R&D phase. Interesting is you are using some heat coming from the waste or eventually nuclear plants, and the cost is quite interesting, but it's pure R&I. And here you have some cost. It's not that visible comparing SOC, alkaline, and PEM. Again, the more power you want, the cost is higher, but the ratio is sometimes quite interesting. So hydrogen is produced. I said before, hydrogen is a key way a key process to store electricity. Okay, how can we store hydrogen? Compressed shape, eventually liquid shaped. But liquid means minus 253 degrees, so you have to inject energy to liquefy the hydrogen, or eventually cryo and cold compressed. This is the case at minus 40 degrees at the refuel station. So you have some physical ways to store hydrogen. Material, as you know, hydrogen is quite tricky molecule because it leaks very easily, and it penetrates notably the metal. So some people say corrosion. No, it's not corrosion, it's embrittlement. So the hydrogen is penetrating the metal. Good. And what if we use the metal as a sponge, or any organic liquid as a sponge to transport? Interesting is no pressure constraints, no temperature constraints. Safety-wise, it's very much simple. But you are carrying a sponge, and the hydrogen is just a part of it, and not more than 10%. Okay? So again, feasible, yes, but effective, depends. Transport. An interesting map to compare. I remain in France, where the nuclear plants are located in France, and where we could be the consumers of the hydrogen. And there we can have a look on the hydrogen backbone project from Europe, which is to reuse 69% of the current pipelines to transport hydrogen. Is it to transport pure hydrogen? No. Blended hydrogen with some percentage of natural gas, of methane. So you have this very interesting map, and there is no surprise. The big industrial players, refineries, cementeries, ammonia and so on, are there on this network. Question is, how can I connect my nuclear plant, which is a place where there is water, not close to city and so on, and the customers? How shall I transport? There you have interesting graphs on hydrogen pipelines, hydrogen trucks, or liquid hydrogen. Just for example, a couple of weeks ago, my friends from CAPGEMINI made a study to worked on a case on transporting liquid hydrogen for Sines in Portugal to Rotterdam. Because as Chris mentioned, Central Europe will have to import a lot. So ports are strategic place to manipulate and use hydrogen. So this is the question. And for nuclear, I do believe this is a very interesting challenge. Okay, so we are talking here about the current plants we have, APR and so on. Maybe SMR can be a solution, but again, SMR have to be installed inside a new industrial facilities, and that not be that simple.
Luc, apologize, Luc.
Sorry.
You have only 2 minutes left. Apologize,
okay.
Luc, for
No. You're playing your role. So I think, let me share. So this is okay. So what can we do? Predict and simulate, and some kind of tools that we are using CAPGEMINI. First of all, this one I like very much, SOS Trade Witness, which is an open source, and you have all the inputs on the screen. Can I align the planets of the social acceptance, the environment, natural resources, materials, energy, microeconomics, and policy? Can I build very high level modelization to try to predict and make the good choice? And this is a very interesting project that's running. And again, it's open source. And some examples that we have inside CAPGEMINI on some, it's much more tactical. Okay, can I predict the storage of the hydrogen? Can I predict the supervision of the systems, and so on and so forth? So this is my conclusion. I started by saying nothing is new, definitively. Everything is possible and feasible, definitively. Devil hides onto details, and opportunity business is even to make money or avoiding or wasting or complying with the rules. And again, so this is my message. This is, I do believe, very interesting momentum for nuclear to be connected to these hydrogen opportunities. That won't be that simple. We have to not to be surprised, badly surprised at the end. So the way to do that is to use massive amount of prediction simulations and so on, meaning being capable to access the data which are proprietary and that not been shared so that much. This is the end of my long speech. Sorry for that.
Thank you. Appreciate, and I'm sorry if I had to interrupt.
No. This is
I think it's very interesting, and I like the challenging questions you are sharing. I mean, we were looking for answers. You come with questions. I like that. But it's funny because that's actually the situation of the market today. Is there are more questions than answers, and that's why we need people like consultants and independent consultants to help solving this. So, Luc, maybe a quick question to you, and then we will open the Q&A session. A quick question to you is, as an independent consultant, and I think you have an overview of the technology within the value chain. You showed one slide about the different electrolyzers technology, alkaline, PEM, SOEC. I think we all know that alkaline is kind of strength of China. PEM, it's a bet of Europe that it's more flexible for renewable energy, and SOEC, which is more suitable for nuclear. My question to you is, do you believe that I don't know, like having something similar to IRA in Europe might accelerate the development of the technology in Europe, for instance, because we are presenting Europe right now?
I do believe the answer is yes. Why? Because again, the market is not really there. So you have to help, support, encourage, whatever, the stakeholders to invest massively. Because I mentioned the Alstom hydrogen train in Germany. So one day the German lender said, "I'm stopping. This is not okay. It's a waste of money, but this is not that dramatic, I'd say." But if you have a company like Tata Steel, for example, deciding to change the industrial process to build green steel, going through the RI, for example, if they made a bad choice, the coming back to the past is impossible. And so they have to be reassured. So you have to have a POX, whatever, and again, covering not only the industrial feasibility, but the economical cost. Considering, and I think Chris mentioned that, sometimes you have a little bit more expensive solutions, but when the price is stable, when you can predict, there you can engage. So answer is yes, because market has to be reassured that not only it works, but it's affordable, because again, it works. It works. But is it the best solution? Is it the best solution? Because at the end, something has to pay for that. Okay. And again, if the price is very well controlled, and nuclear energy, this is a amount of energy which is stable, okay, not dependency on the wind or the nights and so on. And so definitely, yes, I think we need this kind of initiative. And it's already the case for mobility and so on. But yes, that won't be possible without strong support. This is my personal position.
Thank you, Luc, for your opinion and those thoughts and insights. So now I open the session of Q&A. We have had many questions on the chat tab and also on the Q&A tab. So please feel free, if you still have questions, to write it down. If we have time, we can ask you to unlock your let's say to use your mic to raise the question directly. But for the moment, we have few questions that we can go through. The first one is for Lavinia. It's about it's from Eilert Walter. It is about how does the European Union and how, which is I think a very good question, plan to tackle the decision of some European countries that do not believe, or let's say they are against the nuclear hydrogen position.
Yes, hello. So I saw the question. Yes, thank you. It is a very good question. From a perspective of, let's say, a member of the European Council, it is, we know, the right of every member state to decide on their energy policy. And I know that Germany is doing this, and so is Romania. The problem is that we are ending up sometimes in a difficult situation where we have to establish a common policy at EU level, and then we hope that the Commission is an honest broker and establishes conditions that do not lead to some member states not being able to implement their programs. So I don't think there is a position of the Commission on this, since it's the right of every member state. But what we are trying to do as a nuclear alliance, of course, is to promote this level playing field and the principle of technology neutrality, which is enshrined in the treaty, and make sure that all the policies going forward incentivize, create the conditions for nuclear to complement existing technologies, to create stimulus for innovation, as has been discussed here already. So it is again the issue of national decision, but also at EU level. And let's not forget the Euratom Treaty, which has a promotional role for nuclear. But it's more or less a discussion of leveling the playing field and having a balanced approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Lavinia, for the answer. The second question from the audience, I will direct it to Levi from INL. It's actually from Jonathan Easthope. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, Jonathan. So the question, Levi, is about what is the assumptions about charge factor of a nuclear power plant when we are calculating the LCOH? Is it less than 80%? Like, is it still affordable and profitable when it's less than 80%?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I want to point something out here. You're actually less concerned about the capacity factor or the availability of the nuclear plant. You're actually more concerned about the capacity factor of, in this instance, the electrolyzer. Meaning, it doesn't matter if we're only using 20% of the energy from the power plant. What matters is that we're getting everything we can out of the electrolyzer plant. And in the modeling we've done thus far, obviously there's a negative correlation between profitability and how much you're leveraging your electrolyzer plant. So you want to run it as much as you can. With that being said, we've done models where, say, you upgrade a plant and you get 50 megawatts, right? And you use that to just produce hydrogen. And because you can make more off of that, as some of those models show, then you want to do that. But the capacity factor you're more concerned about is the capacity factor of the electrolyzer versus the nuclear power plant. Having said that, you also have to keep in mind, if you're running like a hybrid system where integrated energy systems, sometimes it's almost like a switch that somebody flips, right? The price of energy has gotten way too low, and so we flip the switch, and magically now we're switching to hydrogen, right? And so sometimes it's less about capacity factor, more about understanding, when is it most profitable for us to transition to hydrogen? But ultimately, you want to keep that hydrogen facilities capacity factor high.
Thank you, Levi, for the answer. Maybe next question is from the chat, but I will summarize it. I also had the same question in my mind for Janet. Janet, in one of your slides, you mentioned that some nuclear power plants in Europe are hesitating. And the question was, why do you think those nuclear power plants are still hesitating? Is it because we don't have an IRA in Europe? So which means, is it a lack of policy, or is it related to other aspects? Janet? Yes, go ahead, Janet. You can answer the question if you can, if your mic is. Okay, so I think Janet still have some issues. We will leave the question to Janet to come back and answer it. Otherwise, I will take the initiative and answer it on behalf of the Hydrogen Task Force, as we also thought of this point. The next question is I had a question to Chris, which is a previous question I had in mind, but also the audience has requested the same question. You mentioned in one of your slides the additionality and the issue that renewable energy in general will have to solve the issue of one hand producing electricity, on the other hand being dedicated to hydrogen. Can you please tell us a little bit more about this issue and how it can really be a roadblock for renewable energy to be deployed massively and support massive production of hydrogen? Please.
Well, the strange thing that happened recently in Europe is that electrolysis of hydrogen became the first application on the electricity grid to be really, let's say, constrained under very stringent circumstances. For example, if you want to do some Bitcoin mining and you want to deploy a 500 megawatt plant with all servers doing Bitcoin mining, nobody will stop you. If you want to do a 500 megawatt electrolyzer, people will stop you if you don't use new wind or solar power that you have or your partners have installed. You can only use it in time within the time window when the wind or the solar is being producing the electricity. Only then you can use the electrolyzer. And so you cannot use it from other sources on the grid. And in space, you can only use solar or wind, which is within a bidding zone or a neighboring bidding zone of where your electrolyzer is located. And the consequence of that is that when you have more than 8,000 hours in a year, it's very generous, your electrolyzer in Central Europe could only work 1,000 to 2,000 hours. And that would mean that its return on investment dwindles dramatically, and the cost per kilo of hydrogen increases dramatically. And so that is the issue of hydrogen production in the center of Europe based on renewables.
Thank you, Chris, for the answer. The next question, I think it will be going again to Levi. I think the IRA, it's really always a very interesting source of information and question, especially for us in people in Europe, because we are lacking something similar. We are lacking clarity in policy. We are lacking, let's say, straightforward policy, so we can actually have that visibility. So unfortunately, we don't have that in Europe, but we are very happy that you guys in the United States do have it. So The question is about the $3 per kilogram subsidies that it's applied today in United States, and a lot of people ask the question: is it a cost price? Is it going to be applied as a tax credit for production? Of course, that's the case. But what would be the last price at the end when you add transportation and the additional cost of you know, the whole value chain contribution?
Yeah, so just to make sure I'm clarifying this properly, the $3 a kilogram will go to the producer in this instance. You know, there's some stipulations, like you have to sell it to somebody for use. You can't just game the system and vent hydrogen and collect endless tax subsidies. So in terms of like what impact does cost of storage and compression and transportation make on the ultimate cost of hydrogen? I'll be a good economist and I'll say it depends, right? How far do you have to transport the hydrogen? How compressed does it need to be for a given application? The $3 a kilogram does make a significant impact, but you reap benefits when you produce hydrogen and you can get it to your buyer as soon as possible, as close as possible, because that helps reduce those kind of additional costs that come from compression, storage, and transportation. Did I answer that question? I hope I didn't.
I think so, but I hope it does answer the Jordan Yankov, our participants from the audience. But I believe that the $3 per kilogram has really been a good push for people to absorb the difference and the competitiveness with fossil produced hydrogen. So that's actually a great thought. Yes, Luc, okay. So my other question is, I think, Janet, are you still with us, or I think, yes, Janet is here. Janet, can you speak? Can you, does the problem?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes,
oh,
Janet.
perfect. Okay.
No worries. We have time to be back, so that's good. The question was from the audience is about the hesitation of nuclear power plants in Europe. Do you have an explanation? Do you think is it related to the lack of IRA in Europe?
I didn't get the question. So
the question is saying why some nuclear power plants in Europe are hesitating. You say that in one of your slides. Yes.
So you mean why they're not convinced of our project?
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, there are 3 different points. Like I said in my presentation, that it's economical points, licensing, and safety points. But so they're thinking it's not a good investment, or they're thinking so from a safety point it is not allowed. But without even having the chance to talk with them and to convince them.
Okay, so in other words, if I summarize, it's a safety concerns, investments concerns, but yes, also policy concerns. So
yes, it's licensing. Yes.
Yeah. So that's I hope it does answer the person question.
Yes, that's what we are also looking in our 4th work package in the licensing roadmap. So like I said, we have different scenarios, like if the hydrogen plant should be on-site or off-site of the nuclear power plant. And of course, this means we have to look at the licensing process as the safety process. But yeah, the main difference is if it's on-site or off-site of the nuclear power plant. And of course, it depends always on the country. I mean, every country has different regulatories.
I think, in other words, those questions are legitimate questions. You know, it's very predictable from a nuclear power plant to think about safety, to think about return on investment, but also to think about the policy. So I personally believe, but I think the Hydrogen Task Force and the other colleagues from the business does believe that a clear policy can help to make this use case, answering those questions. So by funding some pilot projects, you will have answers to those questions, rational answers, and rational, let's say, evaluation and assessment. So it's legitimate question, but we hope that we will have a chance to answer those questions, but also to be inspired from what's happening abroad, because the same questions are also raised by other governments in by other nuclear power plants in other countries. So thank you, Janet, for your answer. Did I miss some questions, or is there any questions that I miss? Guilherme, do you see questions that I missed, or I have seen some questions already answered by Chris on the chat. Yeah.
Have you seen the questions in the Q&A tab?
Okay, the question in Q&A, yes, I think I have answered some of them, but I'm trying to make sure that we don't miss questions. I think it will be sad that people ask questions and we don't answer them. Honestly, the objective is to answer questions and solve any ambiguity and share thoughts on this use case. So, yeah, I think we went almost all through the questions. There are a lot of comments, but not questions. Anyway, so I think we still have 4 minutes left. So I would love to spend this time to thank the people who have really contributed to make this possible, especially the people from Nuclear Europe, Guilherme, Andrea, Jessica, and the team from Nuclear Power, from the Hydrogen Task Force, Jean-François Dedin, Emmanuel from Jean-François from EDF, Emmanuel from ENGIE, Fabio from Tractable, my colleagues from Technatom who supported me. So yeah, so on behalf of all the Hydrogen Task Force and all the people who have been supporting, I hope this webinar has solved, at least has answered or has contributed to answer some of the questions. And I'm glad that we have had a lot of people attending today. So we still have time. Yeah, my last thank is to my team in Westinghouse, because I'm spending a lot of time supporting the Hydrogen Task Force. So thank you for your patience and your support. So yeah, any questions that people would like to raise over the mic, if you would like. I think, I don't know if you can activate your mic if you have still one question. We still have 3 minutes left.
Just a second, I will activate the mics.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, Guilherme. Yeah, I think we will have we still have 3 minutes for question. Yeah, I see one hand raised. Who is?
Should work now.
Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead, Takax. Takax, if you can ask your question. We still have 3 minutes. Please, let's. If you can use your mic. Otherwise, you dial your question on the chat. I can read it. Who else has raised the question? I think. Yeah, I think he maybe still cannot use his mic. Anyway, so apologize for Cax if you won't be able to use your mic. My last information I wanted to share is we will send to you, please, a survey. So we would like to gather your feedback. We would like to also gather your suggestions for next webinar thematics that you would like us to cover. And then, of course, we will share with you, once you submit your survey, please send your emails and we will send the slides that has been used today. Of course, we will have the approval from the speakers, but I believe, yes, we will send you the slides so you can have that. Guilherme, I give you the floor if you would like to conclude. And once again, on behalf of all the team of Hydrogen Task Force, of our respective companies and Nuclear Europe, we thank all the audience for attending our webinar and looking forward for next session. Thank you. Guilherme, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Well, I don't have anything to add to what you said. We will indeed send a survey questionnaire, and at the end of the survey, we will have access to the slides that were shared here today. So yeah, I would like to thank everyone for coming. I think it was very interesting, and we had a quite big attendance. So yes, thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.